So, good morning, afternoon to everybody. My name is Sherry Evans Stanton, and let me just make, whoops, okay. And I'm the director of the Sierra Club Delaware chapter. And today I am pleased to welcome Congresswoman Lisa Blunt Rochester. And Lisa's going to talk to us about environmental justice and the future of environmentalism at a time when both racial and environmental justice are both at the forefront of the national conversation. So we welcome Lisa.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Sherry. And it's good to see so many faces in the crowd that I am familiar with. And for those of you who I have not met yet, I'm looking forward to meeting you virtually and hopefully in person someday soon.
Great. So just a reminder to folks, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat throughout the conversation, and we will try and get to as many as we can during the live stream. And welcome to the folks watching on Facebook as well. So let's get started. Environmental justice is the equal treatment and involvement of all people in environmental decision making. And it was actually inspired by the civil rights movement. So there is a direct link to racial injustice and environmental injustice. Growing up in Delaware, what types of injustices did you witness, and did they influence your decision to run for Congress?
Well, first of all, Sherry, I want to thank you and the Delaware Sierra Club and the national, as well as other organizations and individuals that are on this call. You know, it is a really important time in our country's history where I think you're starting to see the intersection of things that have been sort of siloed, whether it's the environment, whether it's justice issues, whether it's jobs, whether it's healthcare and disparities. These things have sort of been looked at in silos. And for me, growing up, I will tell you, I don't think I started off as an environmentalist. I started off as a kid that grew up in the 60s and the 70s. And some of you may recall Woodsy the Owl, give a hoot, don't pollute. We talked about ecology. We talked about loving the planet. And I grew up, you know, born in Philly, but moved to Delaware. And I think you kind of, particularly as a Black woman, I don't think I really noticed the injustices until I started working and started seeing things such as hearing terms like, when I worked at DHSS, hearing about lead paint in houses. When I worked in the congressional office as both an intern and a caseworker, and then doing projects, I started hearing about brownfields and Superfund sites. And you know, all of a sudden I started putting these pieces together, both the health pieces, the environment pieces, the poverty issues and where people lived. And I think it wasn't really until I lived in China. Some of you know that I left the state of Delaware, got married in 2006 and moved to China and lived there for a few years and saw this booming industry, but also saw so much pollution and thought about the connectivity as well, that we are on a planet. We are a part of it's not just our state, our city, we are part of a planet. And in 2000, in the 2000s, late 2000s, when my husband unexpectedly passed away, and I had to come back and think about, what did I want to do with my life? Why am I still on this planet even? I remembered this desire to help and to do something. And there were like these 3 Ps that came up. One was purpose, that people should be able to live their purpose and have jobs and have healthcare and support their families. And that came from my work at Labor and Urban League. Then the other was peace. I was an international relations major and traveled around the world and felt that there needed to be peace in this world. But the last was the planet. That was the 3rd P, that if we don't have a planet, it's all a moot point. And so that was when I decided to run, it was based on those 3 Ps: purpose, peace, and the planet. That's what inspired me. And now in the age of COVID-19, it has redoubled my efforts and my passion for justice. And so that really, it's been an evolution. It's been an evolution.
Wow. Can you describe your role in the House, both on the Energy and Commerce Committee as well as the subcommittee on climate change?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, many of you may know this is my third year in Congress, my second term. And in the first term, I was able to get on two committees that I thought were really important, education and workforce, and the other was the Agriculture Committee, because agriculture is so big to Delaware. And I think a lot of times we think of agriculture as just the food part of it, but we don't think of how the food is produced. We don't think of the impacts on our planet and not just on our health. And so in getting on the Ag Committee, I was really focused on some of the things like SNAP, because that was a big part of the budget, is over 80%. But I also had the opportunity to get into the Farm Bill, a provision working with the senators that focused on having farmers be able to retrofit what they do to make it more environmentally friendly, called the EQIP program. So for me, getting on agriculture, I got a chance to go with folks down in Sussex County to talk about the impact of even the poultry plants on not just the earth, but on people's health. So it was important to be there and to be at the table and to put in funding to give grants to farmers to be able to be more environmentally friendly. But my passion was really around environment and climate change. And so the Energy and Commerce Committee, which is what I got on in this term, it was a whole process. Like, you don't just they don't even allow freshmen on this committee. And it is because the depth and breadth of the work is so broad. And so I got on 4 subcommittees. I got on the Health Subcommittee, which is tied directly to environment and climate change. I got on the Environment and Climate Change Subcommittee. That was the second one I was able to get on, and so I'm higher up in the seniority as well. The next subcommittee was Consumer Protection and Commerce, because again, those are connected. And last was energy and the ability to have clean energy jobs, which then goes back to both purpose and planet. So on that, I now have the opportunity to put forward bills, and we can talk about some of the legislation that I'm working on, but I will tell you, generally speaking, a lot of it is focused on the justice piece of it, and have a community notification bill, because right now, as we see, sometimes there are spills, there are releases, toxic releases, and the communities, those frontline communities, those fence line communities aren't even notified. You know, they're not even brought in. They're not even told every year, what's your plan to ensure that we're safe? So one of the areas that I'm focused on is a bill that focuses on that. As we're into COVID-19, I just released a bill, and it's on both sides, the House and the Senate. That's the Open Back Better bill. It's basically saying, if we're going to be opening back up the economy, we can create jobs. We can do things that make these buildings, public buildings, more energy efficient. Our schools, our office buildings. And so again, to be able to put forth things that really touch Delaware. And I also have a port bill to make ports cleaner and safer, and particularly allow for them to have relationship with those communities that are within the sphere of the ports. And we know we have the Port of Wilmington right here. So I'm excited. You can see, for all of the challenges that we face right now, the thing that gets me motivated and gets me excited is the fact that I get to hear your voices, and I get to go to the table and advocate for those things. So I could go on, but I'm trying to be quick with my answers, but there's so much to share. And I want you to know that we're trying to make the connection. Your voice matters. Even if you think it doesn't, that's why you have to elect people who also want to hear from you, and want to take that information back and turn it into action. So that's a little bit about the committee on those 4 subcommittees. And it gives us a chance to really have a seat at the table and talk about the fact that Delaware is not just agriculture, but we have beaches, and we have environmental justice communities, And then we also have to be responsible stewards of the planet.
So you've raised an interesting question or response about clean energy and more renewable energy. Is there a way to influence bringing more clean green jobs to Delaware, particularly with the tariffs in China? Why can't we make solar panels in Delaware? I've seen some themes around that in some of the questions.
Yeah, I think that, first of all, we're looking at it from a national perspective on the federal level of what we can do to provide both the resources and the incentives for states and local governments to be able to do that from an economic development perspective. I mean, I think that's the thing. People think that it's an either or. It's not an either or, it's a choice. We have a choice of what kind of economic development we do and what kind of jobs we create and what kind of products we create. You mentioned solar panels, but we could talk about, the electric charging stations and the fact that, are those going to be even in environmental justice communities? Or are they just going to be in places where people have Teslas? I mean, the whole concept of planning, economic development is very much tied to creating green jobs. And so that's one of the reasons why that bill, the Open Back Better bill, is focused on saying, as we retrofit these buildings, as we build, we need to be thinking in that way. Are these things LEED certified? I mean, there's like so much potential there. And I think that really goes to leadership. I mean, we're fortunate. I know there are people on this phone, like Willie and Maria, and I don't know if I think I saw her on here, people who are actually both leading in their communities, but also are connecting with people like Frank Cook and others to say, let's make sure that what we're talking about turns to action. So yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity for that. But it does start with leadership. Like this week, June 4th, I think it was, President Trump signed an executive order to start rolling back the National Environmental Protection Act. Mm-hmm. We can't go backwards. It is incumbent upon us to speak up and to expand the network. I mean, even as I look at the faces on the screen, I don't see many faces of color, even though we're talking about environmental justice. And I go back to your original question to me. I wasn't thinking about, am I an environmentalist? I was thinking about, I love this planet. People should be able to drink clean water. People should be able to breathe the air. Why are people littering? Like, I was thinking just from a practical perspective of, I want my life to be better. I want my planet to be better. I want my kids to be better. And I think, to me, the charge and the challenge of this moment is for everybody to see themselves connected to this movement. Mm-hmm. To me, it is like as a kid, there were those things like, don't be a litter bug, and they seemed frivolous at the moment, but it stayed with me. And I think what we are fortunate is that we have a generation of young people that are fired up. Like, they get the sense of urgency. Mm-hmm. They get that, and there's also a frustration because they know this is the planet that they're inheriting from us. Mm-hmm. I think that the diversity of who's also at the table makes a difference as well. So to me, it's not just about, zoning and planning. It is about, being equipped, like us providing the resources to those organizations like yours and like others that can prepare the average citizen to fight and advocate for what they're due, which is, again, a clean planet.
So, we know that there are many toxic industries in Delaware and nationwide that are disproportionately immediately adjacent to low to moderate income areas. They're primarily Black and brown communities, and these folks do not have a voice right now. You see significantly increased health impacts, more cancer rates, more asthma. What can we do, both, as individuals in Delaware and Congress, to stop these industries from poisoning our water and our drinking water and our air quality?
Well, first of all, I mean, I guess I start off with people need to. My sister used to have this saying when I was running that you need 4 V's. One is your voice. People have to use their voice. And that is everything from, knowing what the process is for some of the planning, knowing what the budget cycle is, knowing that information so that you can really use your voice effectively. The other V she talked about was volunteering and getting involved. And that's whether you're volunteering or being paid. We need people who actually can stand up and advocate for good planning in neighborhoods, and be able to stand up even to those big, large companies and corporations. The third one she would say is you need to vote. You need to vote. To me, especially, I guess I feel it so personally because, as many of you know, when I was elected in 2016, Delaware had never elected a woman to Congress, and we had never elected a person of color, let alone an African American. And it was not just me that voted for me. There were a lot of people who came out that maybe never did before. And in the next election, we got the most votes ever in a midterm. That makes a difference, and it empowers me when I sit at a table to say, hey, I'm not just speaking for Lisa, speaking for communities, and I'm speaking for communities of color, even in this very present moment, like with things like COVID-19. Because I was at the table and had some background, I was able to say, we're collecting data on geography and on age, but I don't see the race in Delaware. Now, we are now collecting that data on race, but how can you make decisions if you don't have the data? And sometimes people just not thinking about it. Well, if we are all at the table and find our way to have our voices heard, we can even come up with those things that people have not thought about before. Same is true with COVID. We have senior citizens and people with disabilities that are in public housing high-rise. If you know that their underlying conditions predispose you to COVID-19, let's test there.
Well, and we know from COVID testing that, again, it disproportionately, you see much higher positive cases with Native Americans, with Black and Hispanic communities.
Yeah.
So it's just yet another, injustice in terms of the way our people are treated.
But the reality is we already knew it. We already knew those health disparities existed. They've existed for decades. What COVID-19 did was shine a light and magnify the things we already knew. Just like I've been focused on the future of work and how it ties into all of this, I was focused on it in Congress because I was looking at automation and artificial intelligence and machine learning and what impact that was going to have on communities of color and low wealth communities and people getting left behind, not knowing that COVID-19 would be the thing that pushed all of the things that we've talked about: distance learning, telework, telehealth, and telemedicine for decades. But we've also talked about broadband internet and access, and broadband and Wi-Fi and these computers. This is the electricity of our time. And this is what is also going to either help us to move further forward or leave more people behind.
Well, an unintended impact from the pandemic has been, because people have not been able to travel, a huge decrease in air pollution worldwide and a reduction in greenhouse gases. So how can we capitalize that and take that next step in dealing with the climate crises when all these folks are going to go back on the roads? What can we do?
Well, first of all, from some of the data that I've seen, we saw that dip, but and I thought it, some people talked about the sky was clearer and things like that, but a lot of the industries that we have continued to pollute and be heavy polluters. And so that's one of the reasons why even the bill that we're doing for clean ports is very important, because there are some things that are going to change because of COVID-19 and some things that are going to go back to the way they were. I think that you're already seeing more cars on the road. You're already, and I really believe, again, this goes back to what are we doing nationally in terms of leadership, and what are our goals, and what is the political will to get things done? Because this can either be a moment or a movement like this. And that is also why I keep going back to the organizing part of this, and making sure that those communities that are most impacted have the tools. Sherry and I had a little conversation beforehand, and it was so great because she was talking about the fact that, you said it's kind of weird, this white woman walking into a Black neighborhood and saying, this is what you should be doing. Whereas there are people, Willie and others, and that as allies with each other, we are so much stronger, to be able to say, I know this is the process. You know how to get folks out to hear it. You know how to communicate. You know how to do a Zoom. And then therefore people don't have to have transportation to get there. This is one thing that I think will continue. I think you will see more people using these kind of vehicles so that they don't have a transportation barrier. They don't have a time barrier. But back to the connectivity, they have to be able to be connected. So I think, as far as what is happening, it is, I had a conversation, it's really a blessing that I can say. Yesterday, I actually just talked to Nancy Pelosi over lunch. Who gets to say that? It's like thank you, God. But yesterday, literally, we were voting on DC statehood. And in between our votes, the speaker said you can come to her office and get a box lunch. And we sat on a balcony and we started talking about climate change and about people who don't believe in science. And my point to her was, I think some folks believe in science, but it is not in their economic or political interest to care or to have the will. And they're thinking short term. They're thinking today, tomorrow, my bank account, as opposed to the fact that there are people currently living now in conditions that are unacceptable. And there are people currently benefiting now that need to be held accountable. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is that basic. And it is incumbent upon each of us, just like it is on the racial and structural racism issues that we're dealing with now, for each of us to hold up that mirror to ourselves and say, what can I do better? What could I do more? And to hold it up to society and say, people say we're better than this. No, we're not. We're this. Do we want to be better than this is the question. That's the question of this moment.
We're getting some really good questions from the participants, so I'm going to try and get some of those in. One is asking if the census is going to be extended so that disadvantaged communities will have more opportunities to learn, be reassured, and participate. And how do we make sure that hard-earned tax dollars come back to the community so they can use it for community solar and local water filtration?
Okay, first of all, I love whoever asked the question about the census. I've been telling people, vote and do the census. Vote and do the census. Be counted is really important for Delaware, because I can tell you how much money we left on the table the last time because folks didn't do the census. And a lot of times, it's kids under 6 that aren't being counted, and African-American men are undercounted as well. And so being really targeted and making sure that we get the word out to people is really important. The other piece is it has been extended, but what I want to do, I'll check with our team to see if it's going to be extended again, because I'm concerned about the potential wave of COVID again this next potential wave. And so it's not just for the census, but we need to be looking at all the interventions that were put in place, like the supplemental checks to people, things that people would have never done, Republicans would have never done before COVID. It's like, we're going to have paid sick time. We're going to have basically a universal basic income for a minute. But the census, to me, is so vital. What was the second half of your question about?
Money going back to the community.
Yes. So it's interesting because a lot of times in state and local and federal governments, it's like, okay, this is your lane, you stay in your lane. But one of the things that's really clear is that money is coming to Delaware from the federal government. And so we, as your federal representatives, have a responsibility to make sure that it is going to places where it needs to go. That's part of our oversight role. So we, as an office, have been trying to really track what's coming in and where it's going. Jim Clyburn has specifically been responsible for some oversight work as well in Congress. But I guess the big thing I would say, a good example is like the PPP loans for the paycheck protection loans for small businesses. We started saying we got to figure out, where's that money going in Delaware? Who's getting it? Is it going to some restaurant that really doesn't need it compared to a small minority business that does need it? So that's part of our job. And if there are things that you hear or see that that is off to you, we're a small office, so we only have so much bandwidth. And I see Jacob on the line, who was an incredible intern in our office. That young man is a superstar. Watch out for him. But that's part of our responsibility. So please feel free to reach out to us if there are any things that you see or hear that aren't going there. Right now, my focus is trying to pass some legislation and get some resources here to Delaware.
Along those lines, a lot of people are expecting new economy recovery type bills. And is there a way, you talked about small businesses, but how about getting some of that money to regular people and for environmental and infrastructure improvements that benefit everyone?
Yeah, well, that's exactly what our Open Back Better bill is focused on. And so I would encourage people to take a look at that. Also, I know in the interest of time, we have about a minute, but I wanted to give people a exciting bit of news as well. Next week on Tuesday, the House of Representatives, many of you know that a select committee on the climate crisis was established under Speaker Pelosi for the House, and Kathy Castor, the Congresswoman from Florida, has been leading it with stakeholders from across the country. On Tuesday, knockwood, the actual recommendations will be coming out. We are also looking at pieces of legislation that will go in an infrastructure bill, as well as one focused on the climate crisis. So again, I say this to say, this is the time, this is the moment, and we have to seize this opportunity, and we have to vote like you've never voted before. Like you get a plan for your nieces and nephews. Like get a plan to make sure that you are prepared and ready to vote. People, you're already seeing it in other states where people are standing online for hours to participate because the stakes are that high. It is truly our existence that is high, that high.
Yeah, and there are lots of people in Delaware that are working in other states where there are some critical races that, hopefully the Democrats can pick up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
thank you to the Sierra Club for the support. You have to also know that when you tell folks like me that you endorse us or that you support us, it helps to encourage us and to keep us motivated and to keep us energized to do the work and to be your representative. So I want to thank you for the work that you have done for decades and for supporting me. I greatly appreciate it. Truly.
Yeah. So we absolutely thank you for this. Yeah, we thank you for this candid conversation. I did copy the questions that we weren't able to get to, and I can send them.
Mike, I can't do the live long and prosper. I can't do it well, but I believe it in my heart. So, thanks. Thank you. And yes, please, Sean from our team, Sean Dwyer, please get us the questions and we will reach back out to you. But much love to you, Maria. Much love to everyone. Ultimately, that is what this is all about. Love yourself, love each other, love this planet. And for those of you who do, love God. That's all it's about. That's it.
Well, thank you so much. And we are recording this. It'll be on our Facebook post as well as on our website. And we really do appreciate you taking time to talk with us today.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.